Once you're done picking the colors for your drawing, the next decision you have to make is regarding fonts. And font selection, as with anything related to design and art, has a huge theory behind it. Which fonts work, which features of which fonts work, what are the things that you want to do, what do you want to avoid. There's a huge science behind it. And obviously, you don't have time to learn that stuff. So, I'm going to give you two very concrete rules that you should always follow. Number one, the more you fiddle with a font, the more you're going to make it worse. Fonts are designed by professionals who know what they're doing. So you leave the font do what it's supposed to do. The more you try to tweak it, the more you're going to mess it up. So that's the first guiding principle. There are exceptions, of course, as always. If you know what you're doing, that's fine. But if you don't, and if you don't have time to study the theory behind it, just leave the font be. That is rule number one. Use a good font, and I'll tell you how to come up with a good font in just a minute. Use a good font, then let it be. Don't fiddle with it, okay? That is the most important thing. The second rule is your technical illustration, your drawing is not going to be sitting in a vacuum. It's going to be embedded somewhere. People are going to see it either in a block of text, or you're going to have it on a presentation, or it's going to be on a website where it's going to be surrounded by some other stuff. And it's very important that the font in the figure matches the font of the stuff in its environment, right? So for instance, if you have a font which is sans serif, so it has these little squiggly things around it. So these guys over here, these are called serifs. If you don't know, it's not important. So if you have a font which is sans serif in your environment, you want to use a sans serif text here. If you have an environment such as print in which you do have serifs, you should use serifs in your figures as well. This is one of the most common mistakes people make, because figures are drawn typically in a tool, in an environment which is different from the rest of the stuff. So for instance, if you were to draw this figure in an online tool, it would most likely have a sans serif font as its default. And if I try to put it in my research paper is, because it's targeted to be printed, it's going to have a serif font. And the figure is simply going to look out of place. So two rules. Number one, don't fiddle with the font. Number two, make sure that your font in the drawing matches the font in the environment. Those are the only two rules. Once you have those at the back of your mind, here's how you go about picking the best font for you. Most tools that you will come up with are going to have the default font set to something that is less than optimal. For instance, if you go to Google Drawing, they have the default font set to Arial. If you go to MS Word, their default font is like Calibri, which isn't really all that good. A lot of people are going to use Times New Roman. Do not use Times New Roman. These are all really outdated, severely lacking fonts. Font theory, font design has come a long way in the past decade or so. So you always want to use the latest fonts, okay? And how do you go about finding a font? It's very straightforward. All you have to do is go to your search engine and search for this. So iOS default font. What is the default font used by iOS? It's San Francisco, but it's not open source, right? So you cannot use it. It's not free. You can search for Android default font, and the default font for Android is Roboto. So a lot of the services offered by Google, which are in use by a lot of people around the world, use Roboto nowadays. It might change in the future, but if you search for it, you'll find it. And most likely this font is going to be available to you. So all you have to do is go to Google Fonts. So that's fonts.google.com, and you search for the font, so Roboto, and there you go. So you have that font over there. Whatever font you come up with, you can go over there and you can download it and use it if you don't already have it installed, right? It's as simple as that. Most online tools are going to allow you to use a custom font. If a tool does not allow you to use a font that you want to, you probably want to change the tool, okay? Anyway, so here's how you pick this. Right now, if you go with Roboto, it's going to work out in most cases, okay? If you want print, you can go with Cambria, which is the default with Microsoft Office. It's a good font. Or you can simply go to the homepage of Google Font and search for a serif font. So there you go. Roboto Slab. This works really well. So again, if you want a sans serif font, go with Roboto. If you want a serif font, go with Roboto Slab. It's going to work out in most cases, unless you already know what font is going to be used in your environment, in which case just use that font, okay? That's all there is to it. One last bit of tip for fonts is, in general, the light variants of a font are typically better. So if you have a good enough font, which most modern fonts are, if you go search for it, you're going to find that a regular font which has a 400 weight looks like this. So this is Fira Sans. I really like this font. It works really well. And a light variant of that is this guy over here. So it's a little lighter. Light variants of font look a little modern, especially if you have slightly large text, which is the case in drawings. So light variants look more modern, and it's kind of counterintuitive, but they have been modern, quote unquote modern, for more than like 2 decades, right? Because the average designer simply does not use the light variant. Those who do, their diagrams, their figures, they appear more modern. So if you go even on the web, you will notice that a lot of the modern designs use the light variant of fonts. So use a font that has the light variant, go with the light variant. It's going to look really good in your figures. So these 1 or 2 things can make your figures look really good. Do not go with italic. So italics are very difficult to handle unless used sparingly, where you know why you're using them. Just do not use italic. Absolutely never, ever, 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 ever underline. You do not underline text. Okay, that is from the age where we had typewriters, and it's a different story. Just don't underline text in drawings. Use bold for emphasis. You may use italics sparingly, but in general, a light variant of a good modern font is all you need. That's it. That's all you need to know for fonts. For larger text, we've seen the concept of padding and line spacing earlier on. Those have already been covered. The selection of font is just this one rule. Pick a light variant of a good modern font and then let it be. That's it. Once you have the alignment, the spacing, the colors, and the fonts all in place, the last thing that is left is defining the flow of the diagram, how you want the audience to view your technical work. And we'll cover that in the next video.